Morning. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host. And as a career coach, I help professional women who feel stuck. Together, we position them for the career they really want so they can feel fulfilled and create more harmony in their lives. Because when your career isn't a soulful fit, it becomes a soul sucking experience. So each weekly conversation I have with inspiring guests can be a resource for you to become more confident, resilient, and brave to make the moves you want to make and to do it with more ease and grace. So if something strikes a chord as we are having this conversation and you want more information, please check the show notes below and you'll find connection points for my guest and me. So today, the show is aimed at women who are considering a career change because they're just not happy doing what they're doing, or they've made a commitment to change, but the path they're on is a bit fuzzy. My guest is going to explain how to clear the fog and bring some clarity to your next steps. Chaix McDonough is the CEO and founder of Coach with Clarity, a training and education company. And she's the host of Coach with Clarity podcast and a best-selling author. After over a decade of clinical social work and public health as a public health professional, Lee became credentialed as an ICF coach and now provides accredited training and continuing education for intuitive, innovative coaches. Her Coach with Clarity framework fuses the three M's, which we're going to talk about today, with grounded intuition and solid business strategy to help her clients. We call this episode How Three M's Will Help You Navigate Career Change. So, welcome, Lee. Thank you so much for joining us.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. And I would love to start this show off with a question for you about your kind of your background story, that or the backstory, I guess they call it. How did you come to help women in business and in their careers?
It's one of those stories where, when I look back, the way the dots have connected make complete sense. And yet, in the moment, it didn't necessarily feel that way. I have been working as a coach and a coach trainer for over 6 years. Before that time, though, I was a psychotherapist. So, as you mentioned, my background is in social work and public health. I was a licensed clinical social worker for over a decade. And my husband was in the Air Force. So, we moved quite a bit. And with the exception of some licensure issues, I actually found social work and being a therapist to be a fairly portable career. And so, throughout his Air Force career, I worked in a variety of settings: inpatient psychiatric units, outpatient psych. I was a neonatal ICU social worker for several years. I really appreciated the breadth and depth of experience I was able to acquire during that time in my life. And then in 2015, as a family, we decided our time in the Air Force had come to an end. We had been stationed overseas in Europe, in Germany actually, for 4 years. And so this was about to be a major transition. We were moving from military to civilian life. We were moving from Europe back to America. My children, when we moved back to the States, were 8 and 6. So they had essentially grown up in Europe. They weren't super familiar with what it was like to be an American and to live in the States. And so I realized that we were going to have a lot of change coming at us very quickly. So I made the decision to press pause on my career so that I could help my family make that change and navigate all of the new things that were coming into our lives. And after about 9 months, I started getting an itch to return to some sort of professional experience. And yet I had a sense that mental health was no longer the field for me. I was really interested in continuing to serve others and support others, but I was looking for something outside of a traditional therapy or mental mental health way to do so. And while all of this was going on, my husband, who is a periodontist, bought a dental practice in our town. And very quickly, he had to learn how to operate not only as a clinician, which he is exemplary at. He's a fantastic periodontist, but he had to learn how to be a business owner. And that was not something that dental school taught him. It was not something the Air Force taught him. There was a lot of on the job training. And I remember thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great if there was almost like a therapist for businesses so that they could come in and support the business owner as they were learning all of these new skills and trying to take these new steps? And in that question, the research that followed led me into coaching. And so I really credit my husband actually and his experiences as being my inspiration for entering the coaching field. So I participated in a coach training program, got my coaching credential, started to coach other healthcare providers, a lot of therapists because of my background. And the more people I coached, the more they asked me, wow, tell me more about this coaching thing. How did you become a coach? Can you help me maybe become a coach too? And so that's when I started to pivot from providing coaching to training other people to become ethical, intuitive coaches. And so while I still have a few one on one clients that I work with, because I do love coaching and I never want to fully get away from that, most of my work now is really spent on the training and education side of the house, where I have accredited programs to help people become coaches and then maintain their coaching credential as well.
Wow, what a journey.
Right?
What a journey. And it is, I love the way that happened for you. It was not how you planned it, yet you
Mm-mm.
were open to exploring the possibilities that arose as you were living your life and supporting your family and then helping your husband and figuring out that other people need that kind of help too. I love that. I think that's so it actually, I hear it a lot, but a lot of people don't recognize how serendipitous it can be if you allow it to be. Like it's
I
meant
think that, yeah, I think that's a lovely way of describing it. And in the moment, I'm not sure I would have described it that way. There was
yeah,
a lot of late nights and tears and questioning and wondering, what am I doing? Am I
absolutely.
turning my back on my first profession? What does it say about me to move away from therapy and into coaching? I will be honest with you, the first 12 to 18 months of my business were difficult. There was a
Yeah.
lot of introspection and self reflection. And I think part of the reason it took so long and it was so difficult was because I was hesitant to surrender to the opportunities that were coming before me. I did have some idea of what it should look like to run a successful coaching business. And I spent probably too much time trying to shift into that mold instead of really honoring who I was as a coach and making space for me in my business. The minute I took that approach and decided to show up fully in my business and to create a business that felt good to me, that's when I started seeing growth and that's when things started clicking for me.
I'm so glad to hear you say that because there are so many people out there in all kinds of business, not just coaching, and they're seeing how other people have done it and they're trying to replicate that without taking into consideration who they are at the core and what they bring. And they're trying to do it like everybody else without uh, recognizing that their uniqueness is what will draw their, what I like to call, perfectly aligned clients or customers to them. So
Mhm.
that's such a great point that you made. Okay, let's talk about these three M's. We
Yes.
suggested in the title that three M's will support women making a career change. So let's start by talking about what they are. What are the three M's?
The three M's are meaning, mindset, and mindfulness. So those are the three M's: meaning, mindset, and mindfulness. And these three M's are anchored in an approach that I learned when I was practicing as a therapist. I had the good fortune of completing a 6-month traineeship in acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short. And ACT is a wonderful approach to use, yes, in the therapy room with clients, but it's more than that. It's really a way that you can choose to live your life. So you are really examining what gives your life meaning and purpose. That's the first M. How you relate to your thoughts and feelings. That's the second M. And then also how you connect to the present moment. That's the third M. And so while these concepts certainly have use psychotherapeutically, they're really meant to be very broadly applied. And in fact, when I was going through my traineeship, I had a mentor who I met with on a regular basis, and he was clear that if I was going to be an ACT clinician or an ACT coach, I needed to be willing to do the work that I was asking my clients to do. And so all of that work around clarifying meaning and creating a relationship anchored in mindset and practicing mindfulness, that was all work that I was doing. And it really changed my life. I really view my life as being kind of pre-act and then post-act. And so when I started coaching, I realized these principles that I have been using in the therapy room, they are just as relevant and important to use with my coaching clients as well. And so that's what prompted me to write my book, Act on Your Business, and really look at how can we apply these concepts that are rooted in ACT philosophy in a way that can support small business owners, entrepreneurs, professionals of all stripes.
I love that. ACT, acceptance and commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Those are such important concepts for us, right? If we're not accepting, right? Things happen, they're out of our control. We need to be in that mode in order not to resist and struggle, right? And then
Yes.
making the commitment to living our best life is the other side of that. I love that there is a name for this, ACT, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. That's so cool. Okay, so meaning, mindset, and mindfulness. Let's talk about those. Let's kind of pull the curtain back on those a little bit. So, what does a decision making process that centers on meaning really look like?
Yes. So at the heart of meaning is knowing what matters most to you. So another way of saying that is to know what your core values are. Because once you understand what your values are, the principles that you espouse, the legacy you want to leave behind, when you know what truly matters to you, then those values become your compass. And then that then informs the decisions you make and the actions you take in your life. So whenever I am working with a client, now, to be honest with you, you can start with any one of the three M's, but I tend to find that meaning is a natural starting point for my work because we can get to know each other through talking about values and what matters most to you and what you want to be known for. And the other piece with that too is that I find when I am with someone who has values that may not be identical to mine, in fact, probably aren't identical to mine, but when they are consistent or congruent with mine, that tends to be how I know, okay, this is a client that I want to continue working with, or a relationship that I want to foster. This is a person that I want to kind of maintain that connection with in my life. So knowing what my values are helps me make decisions like, do I want to take this client on in my practice? Do I want to continue to connect with this person? And then it also helps provide that structure when I'm trying to decide, do I take this job or that job? Do I travel here or do I travel there? I can really use my personal and professional values to provide that direction.
I love that, and I work with values a lot with my clients as well. And I suggest that when you are centered on your core values, it becomes kind of a checklist for every choice and decision you have to make. Are you honoring your core values? Are you really standing in integrity with who you are by making these choices? I love that. I love that you started there, and that the meaning um, really centers on what do you value most, what's most important to you, what means the most to you. Okay,
And
so
and sometimes though, we have to ask that question, what matters most to you right now?
now,
Yes,
absolutely,
because
because it
sometimes
changes.
exactly.
It
And
changes.
we're complex human beings, so
Mm.
it's possible for us to hold multiple values that at times conflict with each other. I have a strong value around service and wanting to be present for my clients. I also want to be present for my family and to be
Mhm.
at my kids' baseball games and to be present for my husband. And sometimes that value of family and that value of service can conflict with each other. And to say yes to one may mean saying no to another. So when we have those value clashes, some of times the work is around understanding that we can honor both values, but sometimes one will take priority over another. And then we have to look at kind of the long game. So to make sure that over time, we're still finding a balanced approach to living out our
Right,
values,
right.
even if in individual moments we are having to prioritize one over another.
And that's where, well, that's what I call harmony, right?
Hmm.
That's how we find the harmony in our lives, because every single day is different, right? It's new, and we don't really know what's going to happen an hour from now. And it may cause us to make choices that create kind of this shifting value set, right? That although we are still absolutely, in your case, honoring your sense of service and your value to family first, which is my number one core value. So that's why we get along so well, right? Um, it is just acknowledging, accepting, right, that they can shift and that you can find the harmony in that, and that's okay. Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that. All right, so let's talk about the second M. How do you define mindset? There's so much being written and spoken about with regard to mindset today. Why is it an essential component when navigating career change?
I think mindset, it's one of those things that is definitely in the zeitgeist. We've been talking about it for years, and I love that it's receiving so much attention. And many of us are probably familiar with a more traditional approach to mindset work. I think about Dr. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, and she talks about fixed mindset versus growth mindset and how flexible and adaptable we are when it comes to life, to change. And I think that's a perfectly valid approach to mindset, but I take a slightly different angle when I'm talking about mindset. And when I say mindset, what I'm most interested in is how we relate to our internal private experiences. And so that can include thoughts and emotions, it can include memories and sensations, anything that we're experiencing internally that we're fully aware of, or maybe even things that we're not fully aware of, and that someone else might not know unless we specifically tell them we're experiencing it. So I can hold a thought right now, and you might not know I'm having that thought unless I share it with you. So that thought, that's a part of mindset. And really when we're looking at mindset in the context of the 3 M's, we're focusing primarily on how we relate to our thoughts and our emotions. And what I found is that many of us, when we have a thought, we automatically buy into it. We automatically believe it. If our mind says something, it must be true. And often our minds are generating a lot of thoughts about who we are. There's a lot of self-assessment that goes on. And what happens is that we tend to fuse our identity with the thought. And so when we think and believe something, it must be true, and that becomes who we are. And so the technical term for that is cognitive fusion. We fuse with our thoughts. So part of the mindset work we do is to defuse, to separate that thought from our sense of self, from our identity. So it becomes possible then to have a thought and to hold a thought without necessarily attaching to it. And so when we're looking at thought work, for me, that's where mindset comes in. It's not necessarily trying to change or alter or not have a thought, but it's more about creating space between the thought and the self so that we can take a look at it objectively and then decide, how much do I want this thought to inform my behavior? And where is there space for choice? And what's interesting is we tend to fuse with thoughts, but with emotions, oftentimes we do the opposite. If we have an unwanted emotion or an emotion that doesn't feel good, many of us, instead of fusing to it, try to avoid it. We try to run away from it. Maybe we numb ourselves through any sort of vices, food, drink, drugs. Perhaps we try to have another feeling instead. So we'll do some sort of emotional replacement because it doesn't feel good. And on some level, it doesn't feel safe to experience that unwanted emotion. So with thoughts, where our work tends to be defusing, with emotions, it actually tends to be not coming into it so that we become the emotion, but creating space for that emotion to be present and trusting in the fact that emotions come and go. They're transient. Rilke says no feeling is final, and that is so true. And so, mindset work is very much about defining our relationship with those internal experiences and creating an intentional choice about how we want to respond to them and how we want to let them inform the actions we take and the decisions we make in our lives.
I love the way you explained that, the fusing, and I guess defusing, between thoughts and emotions. I often say emotions need motion because without that, we're either harboring them, getting them stuck, or ignoring them. Um, but so as you were talking about the thought part of mindset, it causes me to think about some of the work I do with my clients is on the beliefs we hold and have held for such a long time, we grew up with, and the opportunity that we have now at any point in time to re-examine those beliefs and ask the question, is it true now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And
Yes.
that's like diffusing or taking yourself away from, right, that belief, to give yourself the space. I love the way you put that. To give yourself the space. I'm very visual, so that's why I like this. To make a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now there's space for choice. Love that.
Yes. Yes. And it's choice that you are making in the present moment, which that'll
Exactly.
get to the third M in a sec. But now there's that intentionality piece. And
Yeah.
no longer does it feel like things are happening on default because of a programmed belief or a belief that we've held for so long that it feels second nature.
Right.
When we're practicing that diffusion, when we're creating space, it gives us that room to decide for ourselves, not whether the belief is right or wrong or good or bad. I think when we try to define it in those terms, it can actually be quite limiting. But instead, it's more about, how well is this belief serving me? And
Right.
if it is serving me, then how can I hold it loosely and still allow it to inform my actions? And if it's not serving me, what would it look like to release it
Hmm.
and replace it with a belief or a thought that is?
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Let's talk about the role of mindfulness. How does that play in our personal and professional growth?
Well, mindfulness, that's another word that's gotten a lot of attention over the last several years. It's definitely a part of the global conversation. And I think initially it may have been a misunderstood concept, in that even now, many people, when they hear mindfulness, they automatically go towards meditation or maybe more new age practices. And I would say that those are forms of mindfulness. They're wonderful forms of mindfulness. I'm very grateful for my meditative practice, but that's not the only path to mindfulness. Because when we're talking about mindfulness, really we're talking about approaching ourselves in the present moment, so in the now, from a place of curiosity, openness, and non attachment. So it's kind of a riff on John Kabat Zinn's definition of mindfulness. And really, it's about knowing where you are physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually in the moment, in the now, which is one of those things that is simple but not easy, because most of us, certainly I can speak for myself, I find it's very easy for me to get pulled out of the present moment. And when I'm not in the present, I'm either in the past or I'm in the future. And so if I'm in the past, I'm often ruminating about things that I've done or choices I've made or haven't done. And so that's often where guilt or regret or shame can exist. And so we can get pulled into the past, or conversely, we can kind of time travel into the future. And to me, this is often where anxieties live. We are trying to plan and prepare for the future, and we're coming up with all of the what ifs. And that too can take us out of the present moment because we're so focused on what's yet to be. And I want to tread carefully here because there's nothing inherently wrong with remembering things of the past or planning or being excited about the future. I mean, there can actually be pleasurable experiences associated with being in the past or in the future. But we need to be mindful of those as well, because if we spend too much time there, then we get disconnected from the present. And when we're disconnected from the present, that's often when many of us feel unmoored, uncertain, and it pulls us away from what matters most. And so there's that meaning M. And it pulls us into our heads where we get overwhelmed by our thoughts or maybe our emotions. And so there's the mindset M. So you can see how all three M's start to come together to work together in support of each other. Because when we are in the present moment, we can connect deeply to who we are and what matters to us. We can allow that to inform our actions. And then that can also influence how we connect with our innermost experiences.
You know, that's brilliant. And we can't have one without the other. Is really the truth of it, right? Um, the way you explained, how you can cause yourself to disconnect from where you are today if you spend too much time ruminating about the past. And it may not even be just ruminating, it may be just, as you say, remembering the past as though it were better than the present,
Mm-hmm.
remembering it, and so therefore you get stuck in the past, and it becomes difficult to be in the present. And it's a muscle we have to exercise, I think, to keep pulling ourselves back to the here and now. And what can we do? Because it's how we can influence what really happens for us and for the people we love, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
future, in the tomorrows that will come. So,
That's at, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think there's nothing wrong with a little bit of nostalgia,
yeah,
and there's also nothing wrong with some anticipation.
yeah,
And I also think there's great value in having context. So, understanding what's happened in the past that influences our present. And there's
right.
also value in seeing what we want for our future and linking that back to our present moment experiences. So, we need all three.
We
But I
do.
think as humans, many of us tend to default more towards one or the other, past or future. And then we can kind of get lost in the present. And so all of this is about raising awareness so that you are consciously deciding, Okay, do I need to take some time and consider context? Will it serve me to spend some time reflecting on the past? Is this a time where I need to plan for the future? So I need to be there. Because when we're making intentional decisions, then we are very present moment minded, even if that involves consideration of the past and the future. So it can get a little tricky there, but I think intentionality is really the key piece when it comes to that mindfulness component.
And I think I'm going to mention the word I used earlier. It really is about finding the harmony between them, right?
Hmm.
So it is, I love the way you said it. I often say, look back long enough to see how far you've come and learn,
Mm.
bring the lessons forward and
Yes.
have a vision for what it is you want to do. What does that look like? How does it feel? And work in the present to take those small steps to get you there. So they are inextricably linked,
Hmm.
the past, the present, and the future, just as the three M's are inextricably linked to serve us, to help us live with um, meaning and using mindset to benefit us and to let mindfulness play in our lives so that it also serves us. I love this. Okay, so we've gotten to the point in our podcast that we get to every time, and it's what my loyal audience tells me is the best part. And this is where you, Lee, get to share with us those um, practical tips and strategies that we can take away today. And it's why we call the show Tips for the Transition. So, what is your first tip?
Yes. So my first tip pulls in that first M of meaning. Because that's really all about clarifying what matters most to you. So, a lot of times when people do that, they'll think about what they stand for, what matters most to them. Sometimes they'll think about what makes them feel happiest or most fulfilled. But a tip that I have, and it may sound a little counterintuitive, so bear with me, but a tip that I have is to think about what really makes you angry. Because anger can be a really powerful indicator because I find that when I get angry and when many people get angry, it's because on some level a button has been pushed, and behind that button is a value. And so when we get
Mm.
angry about something, it can often tell us what value we feel is potentially being threatened. So even though it may be a little uncomfortable to sit with that anger emotion, we can do that. We can create space for that anger because it can let us know, wow, I got really angry about this because it means so much to me. And what about that means so much to me? That can tell you a lot about what's important to you.
I love that. I love that. That's such a great exercise to go through. It's like push it when people push buttons. It's those trigger points that we have, and there's a reason for them, right? There's
Mhm.
a reason because they are in some way bumping up against something that we find is feel is really important to us. I love that. That's a great way to look at it. All right. What's your second one?
Okay. Second tip, tip number 2. This actually connects a little bit with what you were talking about earlier in terms of the work you do with your clients with that visioning and asking them to create that vision of their ideal future of what that holds. And we can do that with meaning because we can think about if I'm living my life in a way where I'm fully expressing my values, what would that look like? And so once we have that vision kind of clarified, you may find that that's when the inner workings start to go and your mind starts to kind of feed you some thoughts like, well, who are you to live that kind of life? Or why do you think you are the one to do that? Or are you even capable? Or it's not safe to live that kind of life. And so oftentimes when we're thinking about what's possible, that's when we get a lot of the overactive safety monitor, that is the mind, churning all of those thoughts, even fears about the what ifs. And so my second tip is to Notice when that's happening, and then pause to ask, how might my mind be trying to help me right now? Even though these thoughts might sound, we'll use the word negative. That's not a word I typically use, but we'll use that for now. Even though those thoughts may have a negative component, they may make me feel like I'm not worthy. How, how might they make how might they be trying to help me? How might they be serving me? So, as an example, when I was thinking about starting my coaching practice, a thought that I had was, who do you think you are to do that? There's dozens, hundreds, thousands of coaches out there. What makes you so special? What makes you so different? And so when I sat with that, and it was uncomfortable, but when I sat with that, I realized, okay, this is my mind trying to keep me safe. This is my mind trying to protect me. Going out on my own, calling myself a coach, starting a business, this is risky. I'm really putting myself out there and making myself vulnerable, and that doesn't feel safe to my mind. And so my mind is doing whatever it can to keep me safe, including bombarding me with these thoughts. So the tip is to notice when that happens. And then this is an old ACT exercise that I've adopted. The tip is to say thank you to your mind, and not sarcastically, but truly from a place of gratitude. Oh, mind, thank you so much. I can see that you're trying to protect me. I can see that you're trying to keep me safe. I appreciate that. But right now, safety is not what I need. And so I'm going to release you from that responsibility. But we start from a place of gratitude so that we understand and even normalize why it's happening. And then again, we have the power to decide where we go from there. So, tip number 2 is to thank your mind when all of those thoughts start coming up, and then decide how you want to move forward.
That is such a great tip, and it's so hard to do. You said,
Yes, it is.
and do it with gratitude, not sarcasm, because it's like, oh, thanks again, mind. I've had lots of those moments. That's a great tip, though, to do it with gratitude and say, thank you for wanting to keep me safe, but that's not what I need right now. I love that. That's powerful. It's
Thank
powerful
you.
because it actually puts you back in control of what it is you really want to do, and it opens things up for you to explore them in a way that is not hampered by all of the safety thoughts, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That it's too risky. What if you fail? Yeah, but what if you fly?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
So
that's
often
what
we
allows
don't
you.
consider that what if, do we? We tend to
Yeah,
our mind kind of defaults the
yeah,
negativity bias, which is
yeah.
understandable.
And
But yeah,
that's the
what
other
if?
that's yeah, and that's the other thing I would suggest to do when those thoughts come in your head is what's the opposite thought,
Hmm.
right? What if you
Yes.
fail? What if you fly?
Yes.
And hang
Oh, I
on
love
to
that.
those long enough to explore the option that that could happen.
Hmm.
And what would it take for that to happen? Yeah, I love that. It's a great tip. Okay, you have one more?
I do. I have one more. And you may have noticed we had one tip on meaning, one tip on mindset. So, guess what the third one is? Let's talk about mindfulness. And this one, I think sometimes I have a tendency to do this. I feel like if I'm going to be mindful, I need to carve out time and sit on my meditation pillow for a minimum of 10 minutes, and I need to be quiet and reflective. And what I want to suggest is actually mindfulness does not have to be that drawn out. Now, it certainly can be. And certainly, if you want to create a lovely mindfulness ritual, I would encourage you to do so. But actually, especially if mindfulness is a newer practice, I would encourage you to look for what I call mindful moments. And so, an example, whenever I am at a red light, that is my visual cue to take a mindful moment. And for me, that just means noticing my breath for the entire duration of the red light, of taking time to notice how I'm feeling in my body. Oftentimes I'll realize, oh, my shoulders have hunched up and in. And that mindful moment just allows me to reconnect to my body and reshift. I can do that through the breath, through the body. I find anything that uses the sensations can be powerful. So even the next time you are Having a sandwich at lunch, taking a mindful bite of that sandwich, noticing the textures and the flavors, the mouthfeel, what it feels like as you chew and swallow, even noticing it travel down your esophagus into your stomach, really paying attention. When we pepper our days with these little micro moments, then it fosters an awareness, and that's mindfulness. And then we can take those mini moments and expand them, and it really allows us to become more comfortable living in the now. So that's my third tip, is to find some cues in your life where you can introduce a mindful moment. If the red light works for you, feel free to borrow that. And then just allow those micro moments to find their way into your day.
I love that. Micro moments, mindful moments. You know, it can start that way, and it will expand naturally when you realize the benefit that you got from taking a moment and just taking some deep breaths for as
Mhm.
long as the red light is on. Or like you said, when you're sipping your tea or your coffee in the morning, just
Mhm.
sit quietly and do that, and really savor it.
Mhm.
Savor the moment. Savor whatever the sensation is that you're feeling. And the more you do that, the more mindful you'll become. And I love that you said it. The more you'll live in the now. I
Mhm.
love that. This is
Thank
such
you.
good stuff, Lee. I don't want it to end, but it has to.
All good things.
All good things. Thank you so much. Those are really helpful tips, and I think they are just a different perspective on these three M's that maybe everyone doesn't hear all the time. So I am really pleased and proud that you came to join us today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed this conversation, and I'm just
Oh, good.
feeling an immense sense of gratitude to be a
Oh,
part of this right now.
thank you. Now, I want our viewers to be able to get in touch with you. So, what is the one best way to do that?
Yes. So the very best way to do that is to find me at my website, which is coachwithclarity.com. So coach, COACH, and then the word with, and then clarity, CLARITY.com. That's where you can find out more about me, about the programs and services I offer, as well as the Coach with Clarity podcast. And if you have been really intrigued by our discussion today around the three M's, you can also find a free chapter from my book, Act on Your Business. So if you go to coachwithclarity.com/act, ACT, you can download chapter 2 of my book, and it's a deeper dive into the three M's.
That's fantastic. And that link will be below in the show notes as well. That's so generous of you, Lee, to share a chapter of your book with us on the three M's. I really appreciate that. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
again for being with us.
Thank you so much.
And for everyone watching and listening, I really appreciate that you're a part of this community. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a comment or a review. If there's a star rating where you're watching or listening, just hit one of those stars and let us know what you think. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for professional women who feel stuck in their careers. So if something in this episode resonates with you, be sure to connect with one of us to get a fresh perspective on it. Just reach out and let's have a chat. And you'll find, as I said, all of the links that Lee mentioned, and for me as well, in the show notes below. And I invite you to continue this conversation in my private Facebook group, The Career Transition Roadmap. You'll find the link for that below as well. And then let's meet again here next Wednesday at the same time. Because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.